Beverly Hills Cop 3 is a 1994 film, and it's been 10 years since the first Beverly Hills Cop movie. So let's see how this one is. The plot is we see Axel Foley, who is in the middle of this bust, a stakeout of sorts, and he doesn't think that it's going to be all that bad, doesn't even call SWAT, until a big shootout happens. And during this shootout, his boss gets shot. His boss, Inspector Todd. So now Foley goes back to Beverly Hills to find his boss's killer. Now what I think Beverly Hills Cop 3 is, again, if you saw my review for Beverly Hills Cop 2, I said that I don't hate this movie, and that still is true even after rewatching it. I don't hate this movie, but I do think that it is the worst out of the Beverly Hills Cop movies, and it's kind of hard for me to admit that because I grew up on this movie. Out of all of the Beverly Hills Cop movies, 1, 2, and 3, this was the only one that I had watched as a kid. For some reason, it was the only one that my mom bought me on VHS, and I just watched it over and over again. And I can even watch it now and kind of remember, like, oh yeah, I remember this scene or that line or this moment, and it kind of brings me back to being a kid and liking it. But I can look at it and recognize that the plot isn't as strong. Eddie Murphy is kind of just cruising through this movie. He doesn't seem like he gives two fucks about trying to bring Axel Foley to life. And I was reading this up because I wanted to see, like, where did this go wrong. And the director, John Landis, he said that making this movie was odd. He said that the script wasn't good. He recognized that. He knew that. But he read the script for the first Beverly Hills Cop and thought that that was bad also. But you watch the movie and you see Eddie Murphy and how funny he is, improvising and everything that he can do, and that director, it works. So he said the same should have happened here. But he said working with Eddie Murphy was hard. He said he was depressed because he hadn't had a hit in a while, and he didn't want to play Axel Foley silly and goofy anymore. I guess according to Eddie Murphy, Axel Foley is an adult now. So he's not the wisecracking, wise-ass rookie cop anymore. Look, I understand where Eddie Murphy's coming from. Foley is older now, technically, but still, that's his personality. You can't just say, oh, because he's older, he lost his sense of humor. Just because that's true for Eddie Murphy in real life, that the older he got, the more and more of his sense of humor just went down the toilet. I will say, though, it's funny, when at the time of this release, Eddie Murphy said that this was funnier and better than Beverly Hills Cop 2. Now, so many years later, he said that this movie is atrocious and it's the worst of his films. Which, look, I'm not saying it's a great film, but compared to most of the bullshit that Eddie Murphy makes nowadays, this is a masterpiece. I mean, let's be honest. Eddie Murphy hasn't made a good movie in like 15 years. And I'm not going to argue or begrudge anyone who thinks this is flat out bad, but you can't say this is any worse than the shit he's been making the last few years. Really, Eddie Murphy? This is your worst movie? Not quite. Some things I do like in the film is Billy Rosewood, obviously, who's now the sergeant of the police department. I do admit that Taggart is missed. It's weird that he's not here. They say he retired. I don't know if it was really just the actor not wanting to come back. For all intents and purposes, I don't blame him. They have this new character who takes his place, I guess, Detective Flint, who I don't mind the actor, but he's not Taggart. It's not the same. And also because he's new, I guess you can play with the fact on whether you can trust him or not, because you see the main villain, Mr. Ellis DeWalt, who is this public figure, well-respected guy, businessman, and for a villain, he wasn't bad. I liked him better as a villain than I did the villain in Part 2, because this villain, Mr. DeWalt, at least he had some type of personality. At least he had that whole public persona that he was holding up, and it made everybody against Axel Foley, which was something similar to the first movie. So that I appreciated. You also had John Saxton, which was very awesome that he was in this movie. Great. And you had Teresa Randall, who I guess becomes the love interest, although not quite. It's weird with these Beverly Hills Cop movies is that there's so many beautiful women, right? There's so many women in these movies who, I don't want to say they set up as a love interest, but they're there and they have some chemistry with Eddie Murphy, but it doesn't really go anywhere. This movie, it's more in your face that especially she's attracted to him, and he doesn't really react. It's not till like the very last scene where you go, okay, maybe they can end up somewhere. It is a little weird how the first two movies had a white person, a white woman, as the female lead. We can't have Eddie Murphy hook up with that, right? No, we have to have him hook up with the black actress in the third movie. I don't know, it's just something that I noticed. Also, we have the return of Surge. Not Surge. Surge. And I do admit it was great to see him back, especially since this was the first Beverly Hills Cop movie I saw. This was the version of Surge that I knew. Him coming in and being almost the Q of this series and providing the weapons, all these weird gadgets that are kind of goofy, but no more goofy than the Bond gadgets, right? I love when he gives him the Annihilator 2000. It's this big, huge machine gun bazooka-like thing that plays music that is a microwave, so it takes a while to get working, but when it does work, it kicks ass. It's too bad he only uses it for the one scene. Uncle Dave is the guy who runs the amusement park. I should talk about Wonder World, because that's where this movie gets, I don't want to say weird, but it definitely gets a lot of flack from people. People shit on this movie, if nothing else, for the fact that it takes place in the amusement park. And I admit, that's weird. It makes you wonder, well, why did they do that? I guess it was just something different. If we're going to have Eddie Murphy come back, Axel Foley come back to Beverly Hills for a third time, let's put him in a different environment and scenery. And a lot of people say, oh yeah, Beverly Hills Cop 3, the PG-13 movie in the series. And I gotta say, no, this is rated R. This is actually rated R. The reason why people think it's PG-13 is because it is in Wonder World. Games and amusement rides and he's saving kids. So it feels more, I guess, like a family-friendly movie. Not as much curse words. No strip club scene like the other ones had. I should talk about Eddie Murphy, I guess. Because Eddie Murphy, like I said, he was cruising. There's some moments. There's one or two, maybe even three scenes where he is animated, where he is goofy, where he is kind of funny. And you do get those flashes of Axel Foley from old that you love, that you like. But for the most part, he's playing this pretty straight. And I said in my review for the first movie that I like the balance. I like that he is funny and goofy, but he also is serious when he needs to be. This movie, he's a little too serious. He's a little too subdued. Axel Foley has to be a little bit more funny, a little bit more wise ass. Just because he's older doesn't mean he has to be this serious. In some ways, it's disappointing. It's disappointing to rewatch this film as much as I did like it as a kid. So, disappointing, yes. Horrible movie. I'm not going to go that far. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of Beverly Hills Cop 3? Do you hate it? Or do you think, like me, it's not that bad? Like, comment, subscribe. Later.